I would like to welcome everyone to the 59th episode of Money Trees. When it comes to streaming, there are three words that could be considered the holy grail of solutions: instant creator payments. It's been attempted before by many, but none have truly risen up to stand above the rest. Today's guest is looking to create, or maybe already has created, that cream of the crop solution. We have the founder of Paperchain, Daniel Dewar, here with us. How are you feeling today, Dan?
Hey Khufu, how you doing, man? Great intro. I appreciate that.
Yeah, man. I am excited to chop it up with you. And I want to talk paper chain, but I think it's important to understand how founders got to the point where they are. Can you tell us when you realized that music was a passion of yours?
I think as far as I remember, it was my parents and my dad especially. It was always something that was playing in the house. When he was, this was back in Australia, and then when he was, when he was in school, he was in the school choir. He was in the church choir. At certain stages, I think even back then the choirs went on tours, and he went through New Zealand with his choir. And he had a guitar that he bought in New Zealand in 1963, maybe, or something like that, which I he eventually passed down to me. And so it was always something that was just there. And I just started out wanting to play the drums, and I saw videos of stuff he would play, and I wanted to play the drums, and I wanted to play guitar, and always just wanted to create something with it. And so it was a part of like family life, and then just something that fascinated me, the ability to create sounds that can really resonate with people on a very deep level. And so high school was in bands and things like that, and I just had a lot of fun with it. And then as I got older, I started getting really interested in the, I guess you could say, the mechanics or the engineering behind it, or why things sound good. So, I remember there's that documentary series that used to be like, great albums or whatever, and they'd go through and just sit at the desk, and the engineers and producers would isolate sounds. And that just really fascinated me. Like that on one side of it, there's this creative piece, and maybe I wasn't that creative where I could write these great songs, but I knew that there's something else like really fascinating, which is how you record something, how you arrange it, how you produce it, that ultimately impacts how the listener feels it. And it's all part of that oral storytelling. That really resonated with me. And I started doing record and mix engineering. And that was really when I became part of what I was doing with my life, was producing and recording and mixing back in Australia. And again, it was just, to me, the through line through all of it is storytelling. This ability for artists to create something, and the ability to then put that into someone's ears and make them think or feel something. Um, that's just something that's stayed with me ever since.
Shout out to the Rents for putting us all on to music. And now some parents did it better than others. And I'll admit that for me, my mom was my gateway as well. Like my earliest music memory is being in her closet, like picking out some clothes and listening to DMX. It's dark and hell is hot. Thinking about the fact
Mm.
that shout out to also like would love to go to Australia. I don't know if I can make the flight. I went to I went to
It's
Dubai and it was like 14 hours. And then
Yeah,
they said
it's about
Australia
that.
is over 20. Oh, it's only,
Well, that's total flying. So if you're coming from the East Coast, it's 6 hours to LA, and then you've got a 14-hour flight from LA to Sydney or Brisbane, wherever you fly to. So I've done it plenty of times, and you kind of get used to it. But it is long, and it's a draining trip. It's funny you mentioned though your parents, because my parents weren't listening to DMX. That's that's for sure. Um, Potentially an older generation. I don't know. I was like, they had like Gordon Lightfoot and Marvin Gaye and stuff like that. And Saturdays was always like housework day. So we'd like, have to clean up. We got our chores to do around the house, whether it was like vacuuming or mopping or cleaning the windows. And that was also like the day when we put on records. So they had a record player, and just we'd listen to records while we cleaned the house. And that was like where a lot of the stuff, those early memories of songs that you hear and just like sort of hit you. It's sort of like that's where a lot of the my early memories of music come from.
who is the best artist or band? Who is the best Australian artist or band that is not popular in America? That if anyone is listening to the episode, that anyone listening to the episode needs to go check out. Excuse me. There we go.
Okay, so there's a couple of answers to that. Who is the best? probably, one of the great Australian bands is The Saints, which is a 70s punk band, and the lead singer just died like a couple of weeks ago. So do check out The Saints if you're into like that 70s style clash punk. Another great Australian artist is Nick Cave, but he's a bit more, I would say, um, wider style, I guess, a more alternative style. And then most recently, an artist that I've been listening to a lot. There's two artists I've been listening to a lot. One is Sampa the Great, who just played through Brooklyn in the US. And I think she's coming back in a couple of months too. Sampa the Great. She's actually, I think she's Namibian, but then she grew up in Australia. So she's got a really great sound to her. And then we have Baker Boy too. And I believe he'll be playing in Central Park as part of like this Australian bands thing that's happening in the summer jam or something like that. And Baker Boy is an indigenous artist who sings in English and his native tongue, and it's a mix of, I'd say, like R&B and hip hop and soul, and then also he's done I think recently he did a cover of Blur, so he's like done a bit of like rock stuff. So it's just, yeah, just really nice clash of different cultures and ideas. And so I would say people can listen to The Saints, Nick Cave, Sampa the Great, and Baker Boy. I think that's a pretty good starting point.
Okay, okay. So it's clear that your taste spans genres and decades. You mentioned that you got into audio engineering. When did you pivot and decide that your talents were better suited on the business side?
I think it's I'd always I didn't know how to be part of a band, I think. And that's probably something that's probably translated into so many other parts of my life as I've gone through things like even like founding a company. Was I always had like really clear ideas on what I wanted, and I wasn't very good at communicating them to other band members or expressing that. I never felt like comfortable expressing that. And so I had a lot of ideas, but then in like working with bands, it was always just I've never expressed them. And so I was always just working on other things. And so I got into this like really bad habit of, well, I'll just do everything myself. So I'm just gonna start like, doing a couple of EPs, and I'll just, I'm gonna get a space and I'll just record it all. I'll play the drums, I'll play the guitars, I'll play the bass, I'll do everything, I'll sing on them, and then, I'll find a band to come and just join me. And it wasn't very conducive, I think, to that sort of creative atmosphere. And so as I started thinking more and more about it, it was also like, as part of like teaching myself how to record myself, is like, there's something here, and it's probably a different application of that skill set where I don't need to be the one with the final vision for it. I can sort of like, the artist has the vision for it, but what I can, and I think what I've become pretty good at, is being able to help communicate or translate ideas or help mediate ideas. That was also like another skill set that I felt I had and was able to utilize. And kind of like the engineering stuff was even like, it's not even about being technically proficient at it. It was just more, it sort of fit into a personal skill set that I thought I was very good at and could apply myself well, that didn't involve me having to express myself that creatively.
I can definitely relate on the engineering side. Tried my hand at producing, was a better recording engineer than I was a producer. I love my productions though. Anyway, not a tangent on there.
Well,
Um,
I think if you're a recording engineer, not to say that if you're a recording engineer, you're a producer, but you kind of do that as well, right? Because sometimes the producer's not there, so you're coaching through performances and things like that, and you get a good ear of, even like just when the producer's not there, you get a good ear of what's a good take, what's not a good take, or how things should sound, and you still get really good at identifying things and hearing things that sometimes even the artist doesn't hear, which is like kind of interesting because I saw someone yesterday tweeted about how, this idea that in the NFT space there's a lot of artists who are like self-recording and self-producing, and that's great. And my initial reaction is like, I don't think so, because you hear it, and yes, the general idea is that a great song sounds great in any form, but you just, some things you just hear and you're just like, no, that needs someone else's ears on that, because you immediately hear it like, oh, there's too much reverb, or the mic sounds like it's funny because they've got like this weird effect where they're too close to the microphone and it's sort of like doubling or booming the bass too much, and you can just sort of hear those sorts of things. So I don't know, it's the recording engineer thing. It's like, don't sleep on that. It's such a key part.
yeah, I call it the Rust syndrome, where people have seen that someone can do everything themselves and then try to emulate that. And for some people it works for sure, but you'd be hard pressed to find many Russes. Like, and Russ is the Italian American artist that is hip hop artist that does pretty well, and he talks about how he mixes, masters, sings, does all the stuff himself. And then you look at all of your other favorites; they have engineers and producers and other people in the room that are helping them get these records to the final stage.
Yeah,
It
and
is a
like
collaborative. Oh no, you
yeah.
go.
No, I was just gonna say, like, even like probably the big one, like Prince, right? And it's like, yeah, Prince can do these things, but it's just he's just that's just like a once in a generation talent. Like, not everyone gets to be Prince, unfortunately. So he can do that, but not everyone else can.
I agree with you. So I see how the transition happened. I gotta say, as we jump into it, I like the name Paperchain. It reminded me of Atlanta's Paper Boy, and he would have very much been all for instant creator payments.
It's
Can
just a
you,
Paperboy on Paperchain. I like that.
yo, it's an idea. Great marketing right there. Atlanta season 4. Um, where did the idea for Paperchain come from? Both the name and the actual company.
So the experience of working in the studio is not, it's not alien or foreign to anybody who's been in that, either as an artist or as a recorder or producer, or a manager. It's the conversations are always very similar in that, oh, we're gonna, we'll book the next, okay, we've done these tracks, and we're gonna book the next studio session when the next YouTube check comes in, or the next label check comes in, or whatever. Or we're going to do, okay, we've done the recording, we're going to do we're going to do marketing and shoot the videos and stuff when the next Spotify check comes in. It was just like, that's just the mode that you work in, and there's always like, there's no shortage of things to spend and allocate money towards, and whether it's equipment or whether it's marketing and promotion or whether it's production, uh it's just endless, and there's that endless cycle that artists have to live with. And I think, as I started like going through that, and then started seeing the way the business, or at least the technology of the industry, was shifting, where everything was becoming, heavily streaming based. And so all of the revenue models or monetization models for music became all data driven. It was all based around streams, and other sorts of referrals and views and impressions and other things that have been existing in the ad world for some time. And that what that created was this like really big discrepancy between the speed at which you're distributing music and the way it gets consumed, and the speed at which people consume it and the way it gets monetized. But then nothing changed on the payment side of things. So you're still up to like 18 months to get paid for some of things, even though the data that is there, it's all being generated and it's all available via APIs. And then I think, especially over the past 5 years, it's been like hyper accelerated. And when things go viral, and the ability, again, it's all just based around being able to tap into and recognize data. And if you can use that data for marketing, there's no reason why artists should then still have to wait to get access to it, because that can kill some artists. If your things are breaking, or things are going viral and you're breaking, and you don't have the ability to invest as you need to and capitalize on that, then that may be your shot. So that was just sort of like recognizing and seeing those two sort of things happening, and where the opportunity may be. And I was at the time, talking with one of the eventual co-founders. This was 10 years ago, 2012, when the first sort of ideas came about, and we talked about this idea around, well, if we can get access to the data, can you use that to do some sort of finance or payment system around it? And then it sort of like fell to we went our separate ways for a little bit and didn't really do much with it at the time. But then come 2016, 2017, we started reading about Ethereum and digital assets, and I was like, well, maybe there's a really interesting link between these two things here, where we can connect the data that's happening in the streaming world and connect that to this new financial network that's being built, and maybe there's a way to build a faster payment system for artists. So that was like the genesis of it. And in terms of the name, I actually came up with it in 2016. It was around August, I think. If I go back, I can look at some of the original workings of it. And the idea was that at the time I was like, okay, it has to have chain in it, because I got my SEO hat on. It's going to fit into this thing that's growing now, or in the blockchain ecosystem. So I'm going to put chain in it. And also and then it's going to, and then what is sitting on the other side of it is really you're talking about either one of two things. We were talking about building either a paper trail of data or information, like royalty information, or in this case, a paper chain of information. And then so the paper could represent data, but the paper can also represent money. And so that was sort of where, I don't know, that was sort of the initial thinking, and they just sort of fit well together. And then whenever I talk to people about, oh, I've had this idea for something, and I think I'm going to call it Paperchain, people just be like, that's a really cool name. And I still get compliments on it. So I've had my one great idea, and that was the name. So that's it. Hopefully, it'll be enough to retire on one day.
Name is dope. I think that the idea, again, instant creator payments, if that can be facilitated, whew, like you said, it's a game changer for a lot of artists that are kind of waiting, months at a time. Because to me, I look at it with streaming, and I'll do some conjecture here, and you can kind of chime in, let me know where I'm off at in the way that you're viewing the space, right? But I think streaming can be a gateway to it, but it's much more interesting, at least for me, if with like publishing or other
Yeah,
payments that are much further delayed, like you mentioned, up to 18 months in some cases, and finding ways to say, hey, I have the data for this. I'm just waiting on this payment to come in. Can we utilize this now? I think that the reason I'm a little hesitant on streaming is I look at the Web3 music NFT ecosystem, right? And on one hand, most of the artists that are doing well in streaming haven't yet transitioned over to this place. And so it becomes thinking like, it's not really broken for them because they're making so much on their sides of it. They're not really dependent on it. And a lot of the artists that are dependent on it may not be streaming enough where the streaming value is any real even money to them. So even though they might wait, 2-3 months to get that payment, it might only be $30-$40. So it
right.
starts thinking like who is the target audience for this? And again, when it comes to streaming in you guys' mind, what type of artist really can utilize Paperchain? Because I would love to, I talk to artists on the daily, and when I think about like, how can you utilize this? Like, what are those conversations like? What are the artists that you all are looking for that think they have the most to gain from Paperchain?
So we have, for the people who are using it right now, it's quite a spread. The smallest payout we make is like 1 cent a day, and there are artists who are earning 1 cent a day. And that does become, well, it's useful in that you're compounding 1 cent, and that's 1 cent you have in your account that you wouldn't have in the future. Um, but then there's also artists that are getting paid nearly $200 a day. And there's a lot in between. Some getting, $2 a day, some getting 10 or $20 a day. So that may be like, for some of them, maybe 100, 200, $300 a month. And so what we've seen is even just after a week, like you have, even if you're doing like moderate streaming, say you're getting paid $10 a day, uh, you put out a new release, and then even within that, maybe you get a little bump, maybe you don't, but you're a week later and now you have $70 available to you. And that's something that you could immediately put $50 into Instagram or TikTok or Facebook advertising, or however you want to sort of look at your digital marketing spend. There is your ability to then reinvest on a weekly basis, like $50 now that I can do, that I don't have to wait another month, or in this case, in most cases, another 2 months for me to get access to. So even at that level, you start to have the ability to say, well, these are small things I can do that actually start to impact, my ability to make, investments in my marketing cycle independently. Um, so, I think, when I think about the people who are using it, I would say it's definitely in the long tail, and those that are generating at the moment up to $200 a day are finding a lot of value in it. And sometimes it's not even based on music too. Sometimes this is the difference between being able to make an electric payment. We've seen payments go out for electric, so people are using it to cover their utility bills, or a phone payment or something like that. We've seen people pay rent with it. So it's also just having it there so that you're not late paying your bills, and that's being compounded by getting like penalties on late payments and things like that. So it's up to, for us, it's just about how to create something that's more artist owned and gives them the freedom to it, because the way the current system works is You've got a lot of middle layers who are sort of holding on to that float, and they're making a lot of value out of that. But if we could put that back to the artist, it's just, the opportunity to have freedom of access and then freedom of reinvestment and be able to use it as they need to.
So I had to ask first before fully voicing my opinion. So it doesn't sound like this is just a crazy ad for Paperchain because it's not. I'm genuinely interested in the platform. Our conversation that we had offline had me excited to learn more about you and just the impetus behind this idea. But I'll say it. I think every artist that's streaming should have instant payments. You know, when I would work in retail and I would finish my work for the day, I'm like, damn, well, I gotta wait 13 more days to get paid for these 8 hours I put in. I wish I had my payment at the end of that day. I could have worked that day and then went out that night with the money I made from working there. I don't really see a huge reason to have to wait 2 months, whether you're making 1 cent, $200, or $1,000 a day in that streaming landscape. So that's my
Well,
stance.
no, it's kind of what's interesting though, and I think why what pushed me in many ways was like, and this was even a couple of years ago, but it still like shocks me today, is that nobody's trying to solve this. There's been many different iterations of the crowdfund idea, or this idea that you can pre-sell and you give up your royalties, and you can fundraise and give up a percentage of your royalties, which works for some artists, but we know that's not scalable. And so it doesn't work for every artist. And it just sort of creates another type of dependency on credit, and in some cases, bad credit or bad debts. And that's sort of been the status quo. So like, how can we do label advances, but not from a label? How can we advance, but we'll do it independently of a label. So it's still just like no one's trying to solve this. It's just like a really big, there's just a disconnect there because it's such a huge pain point. To your point, it doesn't matter how much you're earning. I think to me it comes down to, it's about a basic access to income and basic freedoms that I think everyone should be deserved and afforded. As artists being the original entrepreneurs and the original risk takers, yet always being the last in line to be able to receive the benefits of that creativity and that risk. I mean, to me, it's just not a system that's sustainable or working for the benefits of the artist in its current form.
It definitely does not work for the benefit of the artist. I say it. Streaming was invented to combat piracy, which had little to do with the creators and a lot to do with the people who were profiting off of their work. But I digress. That is a
Yeah.
conversation for another day. You talked about how Paperchain came about with the blockchain ecosystem growing. How does what you're building tie into NFTs, crypto, Web3?
Yeah. So there's been a lot of really interesting products and different types of, I guess, communities and things that have been built off the back of cryptocurrencies and blockchain ecosystems. Particularly when Ethereum came about, that's what really opened it up for me, because that was this idea that Ethereum was a system that was able to, where you could be able to create smart contracts, which could represent currencies or could really represent anything, but something that could now be represented on the Ethereum blockchain and could now be something that could be traded or swapped or financed. And particularly as this idea of decentralized finance, that you could do peer to peer or decentralized lending and things like that, in a very autonomous and programmatic way. Like when those products and protocols started coming out, that's what got really excited for me, because I felt like that was the missing piece to what we've been thinking about, which was, well, we have access to the data. How would, if we wanted to pay this out, where would the funds come from? And the way you would do that traditionally is you would go to a bank and you'd get a credit facility. And we've had those conversations, and we sat down with credit funds here in New York, and they wanted to give us $10 million credit facility and $20 million credit facilities, because they recognize that there's something valuable in being able to make these sort of payments to artists, and there's a big opportunity. But then in that system, it's like they want exclusivity. So this is the only money you're going to get. You can't get another facility with another provider. And so that means you're locked into the costs that we have for this $20 million facility. There's penalties for underutilization. Oh yeah, if you want to refinance and increase that, then you're going to have the cost associated with that as well. So to me, it was just sort of like, and this is how this is how the rest of this sort of financing works. I just thought it wasn't the right fit. And so when I read about this idea of decentralized finance and the ability to tap into these new pools of capital, um, it just made a lot more sense to me because it just changes everything. It means that we don't have to worry about exclusivity. We can take this and use any protocol that we want to finance it. Even recently, the IMF published a report and talked about like the incredible efficiencies that decentralized finance has over like traditional money markets in settlement and things like that. And so the cost becomes much lower. So you end up with a financial product that is far more efficient and runs at a much lower cost than what the traditional system can. And more importantly, it just means that you can build a product that is actually designed to move and operate at the same speed as what like streaming content is moving at. So that was sort of like that's the why, and that's and how it actually works is I'll get into that now. I as I mentioned, like in 2017, this idea of decentralized finance was really coming about on Ethereum, and this idea that you could take your cryptocurrency and programmatically lock it into a smart contract, and then based on the value of your crypto, you could then draw down a certain value of that. So you could take your Ethereum and say, I'm going to put 10 Ethereum into this smart contract, and then in return, I'm going to get back like $10,000 or whatever. I'll just use that for simple math. I can get 10,000 of this stable coin back, which can be redeemed 1-to-1 to USD. And so here it's like this gives anybody the ability to then get a loan that's fully collateralized, doesn't require credit checks or anything like that. And you can do all of this in a very programmatic way where this all happens in a matter of minutes. And now you have freedom of movement. You can take that, you can convert it into USD, and then when you're done, you can pay back the loan, and that's it. It's sort of like, these transactions can be done highly efficiently, and most importantly, fully autonomously, you as a person. Again, it doesn't require going through the banking system. And so these sort of financial products were starting to come about, and and then on the other side of it was the things that were happening in NFTs, like back in 2017, that was like the early stages of like crypto kitties and things like that. And this idea that you could have these collectibles that you could create games, and that's obviously exploded as we've seen with the PFP and collectible space and the Bored Ape Yacht Club. But I guess while a lot of people were thinking about NFTs as collectible JPEGs, I was just thinking NFTs could be like programmable collateral for media. The ability to take media, or at least the streaming data, and turn that into a digital asset or a digital collateral piece that can now be financed using these protocols was just like that was like the real thing. Was like this is something here. We could do something with this and create a better money product in this way. So the way our system works is that instead of taking Ethereum and going to these protocols and say, hey, we're going to lock up our Ethereum into this protocol, and you're going to give us back this value, and then we'll pay it back. What we do is we actually take the streaming data. So we get the data from the API feeds from, say, Spotify, and this data really represents, like, we call it a proof of consumption. It's proof of future revenue from Spotify. And so we represent that as an NFT. Now, in our case, it's not a collectible, it's not media or anything like that. It's really just like it's a synthetic receivable. It's a digital representation that here is $10,000 worth of streams that Spotify is going to pay in 60 days. And so we take that to the protocol and say, hey, we have $10,000. Can we get $10,000 for this? We get that from the protocol, and that's how we pay it out to the artists. And one, it was a great mechanism for getting into and starting up at a much lower cost than going through the traditional banking system. But to me, it's like we don't have to worry about monetizing, or at least setting up our whole business around allocating a credit facility. And that was like the big thing around going the traditional banking route, was that if we had a $20 million credit facility on our books, everything about our company would have to be designed to optimize to spend this money, because we have this $20 million, we get penalties if we don't spend it. So then we have to do everything we can to allocate this money. And then at a good return too, because this company is charging us like 15% or 20% interest to do it. Whereas in this case, we don't have to worry about that. It's just there as we need it. So it scales as we need to. And it's something that just works. We don't have all of the associated strings with it. And so it means for us is that we can then think about, well, we actually want to optimize our product for the payment experience. And so we can. It's very simple for us to make it, you know, easy to access. So how do we make it easier to access the income? How do we make it easier to either spend it or allocate it or reinvest it? Like that's the things that we want to think about. And so to me, that's the big differentiator in choosing to do the financing this way rather than doing it through a traditional credit facility is that it's the opportunity for us to build a better product that actually makes sense and delivers on this idea of instant payments and isn't just, it doesn't make us a lending company. It makes us a payments company, which to me is a very big distinction and one that I'm happy to be working in.
Whew,
That's a
that's a
lot.
bar. That's a
Yeah,
bar. No, no, I was saying woo because it's
that's it.
fire. NFTs are so much more than just PFPs. That might be a little quote that I rock with. This is one of the illest use cases for me that I've seen. I remember when I first read about the blockchain, like, yeah, I was like, oh, okay, making money, these flips, these sales that are happening are cool, but they didn't seem sustainable. And I started thinking, like, verifiable digital ownership of assets, of things in the real world. How can we tie that in with, completely new use cases? And you found one. Being able to treat them as collateral, as you've talked about, this proof of consumption is such a great use case for NFTs and the blockchain. For anyone that is trying to be a part of Paperchain, you need to go to paperchain.io and join the waitlist. That is a
Yeah.
shill. Does not matter to me. I think the shit is fire, and so I need to add that in there. While
I
the fact that there
uh,
is still a
Go ahead.
I'll say yeah, there is still a waitlist. Uh, what is the future of Paperchain? Is this going to be opened up where people can just sign up? And like, where are you going next with this? What can we expect?
So we are starting to open up and invite people from the waitlist. So this early stage of the company has really just been about one, proving that it works. We've been working with a solid beta group of users to be able to build out the initial functionality and get that working. Now we're actually, we're fundraising, which takes up a lot of time. But then around that, with that fundraising, we're going to be opening up access and getting on all of the waitlist users. So we have thousands of people we need to get on board. We're starting to slowly bring them on, and soon it's going to be open to everyone. So anybody who's generating income will be able to get access to it. Um, yeah, that's sort of like the near-term goal for us is to make this available and something that can scale and grow and be able to work for any artist, whether they're the smallest or the biggest. Everybody understands the value of getting instant access and the ability to invest that before, rather than having the label hold on to it and do it. So that's sort of our focus is just open this up and get this available and into the hands of as many people as possible.
Dan, I'm very excited to see where Paperchain goes. Before I let you go, there are two questions I ask every guest on the show. But before we get to those, I have a rather superficial question. I love the Paperchain card. Is it a regular plastic card or is there some aluminum to it?
It's a regular plastic, and I think I think as we go along, we'll look at various ways to iterate on it. We've tried out stuff with the metal cards that you can get, um, and I guess it'll just be something as we grow, is like something that the user will probably will give them the option. It's like you can there'll be a cost to do it, but you can get a metal card too, or ways to customize designs. We really want to think about it as something that represents as an artist and even as a creator, because we're expanding, we'll be expanding beyond just music and into other types of content creation. So something that's built for you and something that feels like that it's owned by you, and that could be a metal card, it could be a plastic card, it could be something that's colorful, it could be something that's like a matte black. I think we want to give people the ability to choose how they interact with it. And then on the other side of it, we're actually starting to expand on the wallets, like the Web3 wallet side of things, and having that as part of the product too. So there may be users who actually don't want the card and they just want something that can interact more natively with the Ethereum blockchain, which is fine too, because we can build for that. So um, that's how that's the sort of product. I think we'll just let artists really tell us what they want us to build, and we'll be able to provide that.
I love that. That is dope. I am biased. I would love to use it if it was a metal card. That's just me throwing in my 2 cents. The two questions I ask every guest on the show before they go. The first one is going to be, what is your seed phrase? I know in crypto, that's normally your account recovery key. I just don't think that seed phrase is a scary enough term. It doesn't scream security to me. Here on the show, we're planting seeds, planting ideas, growing these money trees. So we've repurposed seed phrase to be a saying, a quote, a slogan, a lyric, a motto that you
Mm.
live by that embodies your approach to your career and to your craft. Daniel Dewar, what is your seed phrase?
Build something that's simple but significant.
I love it. That's a bar. Man, I'm gonna take a second and just shout out to so many of the guests because y'all come through with all these tidbits of wisdom, and I need to figure out how I'm gonna display all these seed phrases because that is so real. Simplicity is key, but change the world. Be
Mhm.
significant. I love that. The second question is going to be: we have this one of one money trees number 59 note. What are we going to list that for on Zora?
uh, I don't know. What's the market been for other listings at the moment? I think like what has it been? Point one,
Um,
point three?
it's ranged from free to like 3 million. So it's there's you can take any. At point
I
one,
think I'll
point one
price
was
it.
yesterday.
Okay, all right. Well, let's try it. Let's go point two, and let's put the proceeds towards. I guess because it's timely. Let's put the proceeds either towards Planned Parenthood or as an equivalent sort of organization.
Perfect. We got to figure out if they have a Web3 wallet address. I normally send it direct. If not, I'll just transfer it out and send that there. I love that. We have had guests before also donate their NFT proceeds and the NFT actually itself. So I'm here for it. Yeah, I want to thank you again for taking the time to come up and chop with us to talk more about your origins and what you are building over at Paperchain. I am very grateful for this time, for this chat. I've learned some. I think that this will be great sound bites for me to share with a bunch of artists that are interested. And like I said, this holy grail of payment solutions when it comes to streaming instant creator payments. Dan, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Khufu. One of the best.
Peace out.